Every year, the charity gala was a display of egos and costly grins, but that evening, it seemed like a funeral for my self-respect. I found myself close to the marble pillars, observing as my wife Juliana leaned in to talk into Silas Thorne's ear. Silas was the type of man who thought a substantial bank balance allowed him to consider the world his personal amusement park. Unfortunately, I had been aware of their secret for months. Ever since the night I observed a late-night message light up on Juliana's phone screen, I chose not to address the issue. Because Silas wasn't only my wife's lover, he was the primary venture capitalist funding my latest tech enterprise. At the time, I felt ensnared, sandwiched between a crumbling marriage and impending professional downfall. However, I discovered something crucial. Silas had a significant blind spot. He believed that because I remained silent, because I required his investment, I was feeble, someone he could publicly humiliate without repercussions. His presumption would prove to be his fatal error. As evening progressed, Silas sought to assert his authority, striding purposefully towards me, Juliana trailing subtly behind him. Her expression bore a weary apathy that cut sharper than any insult. With no second thoughts, Silas extracted a crumpled dollar bill from his pocket and flung it at my chest. It drifted down between my feet. With sufficient volume for the nearby elite to hear, he declared that since I couldn't provide Juliana with the desired excitement, perhaps someone else would be tending to her needs, possibly for an extended period. The room fell silent, everyone expecting a spectacle. Juliana showed no signs of resistance. Instead, she moved closer to him, silently signaling her new allegiance. For a fleeting moment, I felt an eerie stillness within me. I glanced down at the dollar bill, then back at Silas. Instead of responding as anticipated, I stooped, grabbed the bill, and expressed gratitude for his donation. Subsequently, I exited the gala before the main course was even brought out. The bill rustled gently in my pocket, not as an insult, but as a receipt. Silas failed to comprehend that he had just provided the impetus I required to set off a prearranged plan. For almost a year, I had been covertly constructing this plan. Unbeknownst to Silas, his wealth was not as robust as it appeared. Beneath the polished facade lay a delicate empire constructed on high leverage and inventive bookkeeping. The instant I suspected his connection with Juliana, I began investigating, stealthily, persistently, systematically. Over the following 6 months, I liaised privately with members of his board and primarily his key creditors. I did not present myself as an enraged spouse. Rather, I positioned myself as a solution. I exposed how Silas had been diverting corporate funds towards personal indulgences. I assumed a role as the stabilizing force, ready to restore order within the company once he was ousted. By dawn, following the gala, legal measures were already in progress. While Silas and Juliana were probably still slumbering in his penthouse, believing they had embarrassed me, the SEC was already seizing his assets. His own board was readying an urgent vote. As for myself, I spent the night with my lawyers. Our home's locks were changed, and Juliana was permanently cut off from our joint accounts because I wasn't merely abandoning my past life. Instead, I was meticulously reclaiming it. I was also taking charge of the empire of the man who believed a single dollar could silence me. As I sipped coffee on my porch the following morning, sunlight seeping across the driveway, I knew the tranquil phase had ended. Thus, chaos was about to ensue. In a bustling charity event, he casually tossed $1 at my feet and sneered, "I've got tonight covered for her." I remained unmoved, neither resisting nor retaliating. I merely collected the dollar and departed. By the following dawn, my wife was weeping outside our locked house while her new companion was on the phone, shouting angrily, "You never mentioned your husband already owned me." They underestimated their impact on my marriage. They were unaware that I was covertly assuming control over his entire existence. Juliana once said I lacked the vision for her world. That morning, I observed the security footage as a black car inched into our driveway. Juliana emerged, still adorned in last night's gala gown, but under the day's glare her polish was missing. She appeared worn and tattered. With the same self-assured stride she had always possessed, she approached the front door, believing she still owned everything around her. However, her key failed to turn. Her fingerprint access had been removed previously. She rapped once, then more forcefully. "Open this door immediately." Her voice reverberated within the entrance hall. I remained motionless, merely observing from behind the glass. Her hand quivered as she reached for her phone, presumably calling Silas. However, at that instant, he was occupied with federal agents and a legal team trying to distance themselves. Meanwhile, Silas was preoccupied dealing with more pressing issues, like his deteriorating reputation. When Juliana eventually recognized I wasn't answering the door, her shoulders slumped. Gradually, she slid down against the timber, the first cracks appearing in her haughtiness. She had believed that even if our marriage fell apart, she would retain the house, the luxury lifestyle, and the protection of a more influential man. What she failed to comprehend was that the silent husband she mocked had always been the primary tenant and the sole owner of the company managing our main assets. Year after year, I allowed her to think she held the reins, while secretly constructing an impregnable legal barrier she could never penetrate. Minutes following its closure, my phone rang with an unknown number, but the voice was undeniably Silas Thorne's, no longer the elegant host of the grand event, but a man teetering on the brink of terror. He bypassed apologies and inquiries about Juliana. Instead, he hurled accusations at me for orchestrating his predicament, vowing retribution against me and my company. After a brief tirade, he paused, gasping for breath, and then he uttered the sentence I had been eagerly anticipating. "You never told me your spouse already owned you." In the process of my stealthy takeover, I hadn't merely seized his board. I had also acquired his personal debt through secondary markets. The man who casually offered $1 to me was now indebted to me, and I possessed the legal authority to demand repayment on his loans. After granting him a few moments of fury, I responded calmly. I advised him to scrutinize the specifics of his recent credit contract, particularly the provisions pertaining to personal conduct and potential damage to reputation. Subsequently, I disclosed that due to his conduct at the gala and subsequent scandal, I was expediting repayment of his personal credit line effective immediately. The other end fell completely silent, a silence synonymous with power disappearing. I terminated the call without awaiting a response. Outside, Juliana sat on the curb, her face buried in her hands. She believed she had upgraded herself. Instead, she found herself tethered to a deteriorating anchor. I didn't experience satisfaction or revenge. I felt only closure. For the first time in my existence, I wasn't bearing someone else's financial burden. Silas Thorne's downfall was rapid and total, a harsh lesson about how swiftly a life constructed on arrogance can disintegrate when its foundation weakens. By the end of the month, he petitioned for personal bankruptcy. His name was erased from the structures he boasted about, and in investment circles, his standing became toxic. The individual who flaunted $1 before me was now grappling to secure funds for his own legal battle. True power doesn't roar, it doesn't dazzle. Real power resides in the subtle wisdom of the person often underestimated. Juliana's descent was gradual and in many aspects painful to witness. The world that once idolized her polished persona had progressed. She spent months seeking a lawyer bold enough to challenge the assets I had safeguarded. Every firm delivered the same response. The prenuptial agreement was impenetrable, and the fiscal record told its own tale. Eventually, she found employment at a modest downtown shop. This was the type of establishment where she once spent money without hesitation. Juliana now spent her lunch hours alone on park benches, observing the same people she once considered equals. The enthusiasm she once shared with Silas transformed into an arduous struggle to keep afloat. The man I once labeled as dull was the only one left standing amidst her wreckage. Eventually, I sold our family home, its rooms echoing too much of a marriage that had been empty for a long time before it collapsed. I moved to a tranquil coastal city and began anew. This time, I constructed something distinct, a venture centered on ethical investments and corporate transparency. Determined no one like Silas Thorne could misuse my work to finance his indulgences again. In this new city, I discovered something I didn't know I had missed: people who valued loyalty over status. People who recognized that a man's character is defined by his actions when unobserved. My life is no longer about performance or power struggles. It's a peaceful, strong existence constructed on truth. Unshakable kindness neither succumbs to wealth nor arrogance. I preserve the wrinkled bill, a symbol not of retaliation, but of remembrance. The most significant triumphs seldom belong to those who shout the loudest in a room. They belong to the one enduring enough for truth to emerge naturally. Currently, I find solace in a tranquil form of happiness. Each morning, I am awakened by the ocean's sound. For the first time in years, I understand that I am no longer a mere observer in my existence. Lessons of this nature can only be learned the hard way. One cannot correct someone who misconstrues kindness as weakness. Similarly, one cannot salvage a marriage when one partner has already embarked on a journey to depart. Silas's shouts are drowned by Juliana's tears. They stem from a story I have moved past. I am not the man I used to be. I am a man who embraces his destiny. As the sun dips below the horizon, I occasionally cast a glance at that framed bill and nearly smile. In retrospect, The dollar you tossed my way proved to be my most profitable venture. Instead of securing self-importance, it purchased something infinitely precious, liberty.